The New York Times reports that the government created special facilities to store them. Tom DeLonge says that if you hit them with enough terahertz, they will float. What are these alien alloys, and what's the true story behind them? Stay tuned. I'm Ratherby Squidding, and if you enjoy these in-depth views on modern UFO stories, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel. More videos like this will be coming out every week. So, these alien alloys. I was first alerted to them by the New York Times in 2017. They put out an article talking about the Advanced Threat Identification Program, a Pentagon program that tried to uncover the origin of these unexplained stories throughout the military. Apparently, one of these stories is that alien artifacts were actually recovered from a UFO. There's these pieces of metals that I guess are really, according to the New York Times, according to Tom DeLonge, are actually parts of a UFO. I mean, that sounds phenomenal, right? That is kind of the silver bullet, the physical evidence that we've all been waiting for. So, you can imagine when I read this, my eyes lit up and I was anxiously awaiting the follow-up. It seemed like, okay, New York Times, we've confirmed that we've recovered these metals. Where are they? Let's do some more investigation into them and tell me the story behind it. That never happened. I'm still waiting for an official follow-up from the New York Times about these outlandish claims. In lieu of any official follow-up, I started digging myself. And what I uncovered was very interesting. Now, there have long been rumors on the internet of recovered metal fragments from UFOs. And one of the most famous stories is about this fragment that has alternating layers of magnesium and zinc alternating with bismuth. And apparently there's an oft-cited piece of metal that has about 20 of these layers. And, it's a very unusual piece. And it's claimed to have UFO origins. It was all but confirmed that this is the piece that the New York Times article is talking about, and Tom DeLonge was talking about in his interview prior to this New York Times article. It was all but confirmed in a press release by To the Stars Academy. And if you're not familiar with To the Stars and all the groundwork here, please listen to my previous video where I connect all of those dots. But To the Stars Academy is kind of where the people from the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program ended up joining after that program was disbanded. So there's a lot of government people there and some interesting people like Tom DeLonge who are trying to make sense of all of this alien phenomenon. And one of the things that they've done is they've put out this press release talking about their acquisition of a potential alien artifact that has these striations of bismuth and magnesium/zinc. So not only does To the Stars reference this, but if you look into the backstory of these zinc, magnesium, bismuth metals, you'll see that it lines up perfectly with what Tom DeLonge was saying as well. Part of the backstory is that these layers in the metal line up in some way to the terahertz frequency, and if you presumably hit it with enough frequencies and enough energy, it will lose mass and start to float. Now, this is all lined out in a very interesting kind of historical documentation of this article. It was created by Linda Howe, and Linda is a associate of Art Bell. Art Bell ran I guess you would say, a kind of a conspiracy radio program during the 90s. It was very popular. People would call in with all sorts of stories, and Art Bell would listen to them. And some of these stories might be credible. Some of them may not. But it was kind of a sounding platform for a lot of ideas. One of these ideas was this bismuth magnesium zinc alloy. Apparently in 1996, someone sent him some letters. And along with these letters came some metal. The letters described this man's grandpa's experience with the Roswell alien crash. He claims that his grandfather was among the military personnel who were dispatched to the scene to help recover the alien ship. And in fact, these letters say that they found a survivor. And, these letters are pretty outlandish, I would say. They go on to talk about how the surviving alien, they would interrogate the alien. However, the alien had ESP capabilities, so the alien was communicating telepathically. Describes how that was sometimes very frustrating in their interrogation attempts, and that ultimately they didn't get much information from these interrogations, but they did recover some metals from the spacecraft. So this anonymous source first sends a number of essentially just kind of aluminum squares to Art Bell, claiming that they are from extraterrestrial origin. Art Bell does some research, sends this to his scientific sources. They determine that, this is pretty much just aluminum. Well, the source writes back, and this time they have another piece of metal. They claim that this piece of metal came from the outside casing of the ship, and that this piece of metal has some very unusual properties. Apparently, it is part of the levitation capabilities of the ship. Well, Art Bell kind of does the same investigation that he did to the other pieces of metal and sends it around to scientists to get their take. And, it sounds like people are generally kind of confused about this. This striations of bismuth and zinc and magnesium are very unusual, and no one's seen it before. Not only haven't they seen it, they can't really figure out why one might want to create it and what it could be used for. They do a lot of analysis on it. Well, one of the most interesting analysis was an isotope analysis. This is where they could potentially tell if the elements in this sample came from Earth or potentially came from otherworldly origins. Well, those came back within the earthly limit. And pretty much all the test results come back with normal readings. They do some investigation around this levitation and terahertz losing mass claim. They aren't able to actually provide any positive results, although there are some quotes from none other than Harold Puthoff, who is a member of the To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science. He does say that there are some other experiments that he wishes he could do, but they involve high levels of energy, and they just can't do it right now. But there's really nothing that leads me to believe that they would have any positive results from these tests. It seems like there's this very unusual metal that they received that everyone is just kind of scratching their heads about. They don't really know what it could be. However, this report that kind of describes all this history of the metal leaves out one very crucial piece of information, and that is an analysis by Nicholas A. Reiter. Now, he was a scientist, one of the scientists that was originally sent these pieces of metal back in 1996. And his analysis, I guess, didn't really jive with what Art Bell and Linda Howe wanted to turn up. What Nicholas says is that, well, he does his own analysis. He does some tests hitting it with different types of radiation and energies, and checks out the densities and the isotopes, and can't find anything too unusual. The interesting thing that he does say is he talks about his history being working with metal and industrial metal processes. He talks about creating these beams, E-beams he calls them, and that one of the resultant processes of this industrial manufacturing process was that metal and waste materials would splatter on these cooled pipes or cooled surfaces and kind of create these very unusual metal pieces. He said that when he first saw a picture of this bismuth, zinc, magnesium material, it brought him right back to hitting off all this waste material off of these surfaces. And he says that it looks almost identical, and that potentially this sample that they have may just be a very unusual waste material from some industrial process. And this would explain the alternating layers. The things would get splashed on it, in a regular fashion by the regular manufacture process. And these things do look quite unusual. It would explain why such a weird thing would ever be created, and it would you could see someone kind of taking this and saying, "Whoa, this looks weird," and maybe sending it to Art Bell and trying to create a snipe chase. Additionally, there do seem to be some other kind of potentially obvious explanations for this as well. The original analysis by Art Bell and his associates talk about how these layers are microns thin, and that how could you create something that has such thin layers? Well, there's electromagnetic plating, right? That seems like a very real possibility where you could create these thin alternating layers. And, maybe that even lends some credibility or some explanation to why there were some ionized charge associated with these elements or these samples. It, in the end, it seems like there are some terrestrial explanations for this material, which is disappointing to me, really, based on the outlandish claims of the New York Times. And, quite frankly, I'm kind of surprised that if I'm able to dig up all this information in doing some internet searches of my own, being diligent in my searching, why can't the New York Times figure out this information and report on it properly? I got to say, this was one of the most excited I've ever been reading an article, and I am disappointed to find that it may have some earthly origins. But I call them like I see them. I get all the information and try to make up my mind and relay it to you. And thanks for listening. I'm Rather Be Squidding.